Hi, everybody. This is Nicole. Just wanted to welcome everybody to our grand rounds, our family medicine grand rounds for today, July the 7th. For those of you interested in your CME credit, you'll need the event code for today, which is 188047. And you'll want to make sure that you claim that credit today before midnight. Most of you already know, but the instructions are there and you can use the link that I put in the chat box. But just make sure that you contact the CME office or register by midnight tonight in order to receive your credit. Next slide. So today we want to thank everybody for joining us, and also as we begin, if you could keep your microphone muted, also be engaged in the session and attentive. I did ask our presenter and he is okay with everybody. If you've got questions, you can put those in the chat box and I will be moderating that. So if you've got a question throughout the presentation, please feel free to put that in the chat box. Also, towards the end of the presentation, I will be putting the evaluation code there in the chat box, but we do ask for your help in completing that evaluation for our presenter. Next slide. So as mentioned, this is the South Texas Regional Family Medicine Grand Rounds, and we are partnered with our South Central area AHEC, and our mission statement is there for you as well. Next slide. For those who are interested in viewing your CME credits thus far, you are able to view your CME transcript through our CME's website. So the address is listed there for you, and you'll want to make sure that you view and print your CME transcript, and I'll go through that for the next slide. But if you have questions, just please be sure to let them know or let me know. But on the next slide here, those who are interested in AAFP credit, you'll need that transcript in order to request credit through the AAFP. So those members can do that. Their information is listed there. But if you are having any issues, please feel free to contact either them or myself. Next slide. So our speaker today, Dr. Saguil, has no relevant financial interest with commercial interest to disclose. Next slide. He is going to be presenting for us. It's Dr. Aaron Saguil. He is going to present to us today, mentoring why and how. So I will let him go ahead and get started.
Perfect, and thank you so much. My name is Aaron Saguil, and I'm currently the Uniformed Services University's Associate Dean for Regional Education here in San Antonio. So we're just around loop 410 from each other this morning. The reason I have no financial disclosures to make is that I'm not savvy enough to invest in a way that would actually give me financial disclosures. So I'm hoping that one day when I grow up, I'm able to have those disclosures to make, because that would mean that I'm filthy rich. But like you, I'm a family physician and I didn't go into this to make money. I went into it to help people. So with that, we'll talk a little bit about mentoring, the why and the how. And I'm really excited to share that with you this morning. First off, before I go into my objectives, I want to let you know that in addition to using the chat function, if at any point you want to unmute and make a comment, that's entirely welcome. I have roughly about 30 minutes worth of prepared material to share with you. I built in time for roughly 15 to 20 minutes of interactive discussion. And then of course, we have the question and answer time at the end of this presentation as well. So with that, here's my objectives. My hope is that as you leave this discussion today, you're able to justify the need for mentoring both in your life and the life of others, that you're better able to identify those people who could potentially be good mentors to you and others that you could potentially mentor yourself. And then what I want to do is I want to give you some practical tools to help you walk through the phases of the mentoring relationship. And this is the bottom line for today. So if you take away nothing else from these slides, this is what I hope that you get from this presentation. And that is that each of us have tremendous potential and that being mentored and mentoring others helps us to realize it. And so that's what I want you to take away, that you should be involved in being mentored and that you should be paying it back by mentoring others as well. And so here's what we're going to talk about. So in the Army, one of the things that they tell us is that in any presentation, you tell people what you're going to tell them, you tell it to them, and then at the end of it, you remind them what they told you. So we're going to talk about some numbers today. We're going to talk about some literature, the definition of mentoring, the roles that people play within the mentoring relationship, talk a little bit about the logistics and the life cycle of mentoring, and then also we're going to go through some case studies. But very first, and I recognize this is somewhat difficult on Zoom, I would like to hear from you. So hopefully I've cracked enough jokes. Hopefully I've smiled enough that you perceive me as a safe person. I'm hoping that perhaps two of you could share a mentoring story. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be ugly, but a minute long vignette in which you were mentored or you mentored somebody else and what it meant to you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the old educator's trick where I'm going to stay completely silent until this silence gets so unbearable that one of you jump in. You don't have to put on your video, but at least unmute and tell us your story. All right, well, at this point, in about a minute and a half, so you have successfully outlasted me as far as giving your mentor stories. I hope that at some point you feel a little bit more comfortable sharing some of the lessons with me and with each other as we go on. So why don't we move along a little bit and we'll see if we can give you another opportunity to jump in a little bit later on. I want to give you some numbers because every medical talk that I've ever attended, especially the Grand Round series, I've always had a series of statistics, some of which were important to me, some of which weren't, but it always made the talk seem a little bit more impressive. So I'd like to do the same thing for you as well. So if you look at numbers, this was a study that looked at 3,000 adult respondents in a variety of different professions. About 57% said that they had a mentor at some point in life, and that one third of them were currently actively being mentored. Those relationships look different for different people, but if you looked at the average, about 4 hours a month were spent on those relationships, and about maybe a little bit less than an hour was spent in face-to-face time. If you look on the other side of the slide, it's really interesting. You'll see that most mentoring relationships are gender concordant. And so 80% of men that are in a mentoring relationship are mentored by other men, whereas about 70% of females could say the same. If we drill down just a little bit more closely into the world of medicine on the next slide, you'll see that roughly about 2 out of every 5 people in healthcare have a mentor. If you look at how those mentoring relationships start, quite a few of them start organically, but some start at the initiation of the mentee, whereas some of them start at the initiative of the mentor. But what I want to do, recognizing that you're in an academic family medicine and academic health system, what I want to do is I want to show you some of the numbers that apply more directly to you and make a case for why it's so important that you seek out a mentor and that you seek out opportunities to share your lessons with others. They did a study at Mass General that was really interesting. The study ran for 17 years, and at the very beginning of it, they recruited junior faculty, so faculty that were either newly hired or early on in their careers with the hospital system. And then what they did was they offered mentoring for anybody who wanted it. So about 23 of those to whom they offer it took them up on it. And what they did was they followed those 23 in their career over the course of 17 years. In addition to that, they found 90 people who chose not to be mentored as a result of this call and used them as controls. So it's not a randomized control study. It's not that level of evidence, but this is a kind of a natural experiment that we're reporting on right here. And so with those 23 people that did choose to be mentored over the course of the 17 years, they were more likely to secure year faculty positions. They were more likely, those that were involved in research, to be able to receive external funding. A widened professional network, increased visibility. So that's one study. The next thing I want to show you is a review article. So I'll move on to that slide. And in this slide, they were looking specifically at women. And this is a review of about 23 different studies. They scanned a whole bunch more, but they came down to these 23. And they found that for women in medical academia, that having a mentor gave you some improved soft targets, so career development, personal development, but then objectively measurable things like academic output, presentations, publications, research funding, tenure, which is a huge thing in the medical world to be able to achieve tenure as a professor, were all higher for those women who were engaged in mentoring relationships. And so as a resident, for those of you who are residents, recognizing that that might be a larger portion of who's here today, maybe this doesn't make a whole lot of sense now, but as you become attendings and as you become assistant professors, for those of you who go into academia, the rest of you going into private practices, group practices, and other ways of maybe even fellowships and all the rest, those academic promotions are tied to your eventual pay and also the types of positions, the scope of responsibility that you'll be able to assume as well. And so having mentoring early in your career and all points along your career just sets you up for more and more success down the line, hopefully to the point where you can turn around and pass it along to others. And so with that, what I'd like to do is ask you to think for a second, what a mentor means to you. What does a mentor do? And you'll see some of the words here. Some people describe mentors as coaches, as guides, as teachers, as sponsors, people who help you to understand things, explain things to you. What I like is this definition from Johns Hopkins where they describe the mentoring relationship and they keep it really, really broad in a way that I think is really useful. They say that a mentoring relationship can be short, it can be long, it can be informal, it can be more formal. It basically relates to someone who has something that you need, whether that's expertise, the ability to collaborate, a network, that passes it along to someone who needs it, essentially, and mentor giving to a mentee. And so as you put that all together, I'd be really interested in your definition of what a mentor is. So think about what it means to you. And if you wouldn't mind, and I don't think we'll wait an hour, or rather a minute and a half this time, but please put it into the chat box, unmute for a little bit, and tell me just what a mentor means to you. And I'll stop talking so you have an opportunity to respond. All right, well, hoping for a little bit more our audience participation, I do have our first case study here. And so let me look at the chat here because I see a couple things that popped up. Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate that. These are great responses. Someone one is take a step back, walk with you along your progression. That's great. Guide your professional or life development. Good. In whatever area. Good. Good. Go-to person. Helps you think ahead. The time and effort. Good. Good. Advisor, coach. Good. These are all great responses. I really appreciate that. This next part is a little hard to do by chat, and so I'm hoping that you feel a little bit more comfortable unmuting. It's a case study, so let me pull it up for us. And I want us to think about what mentoring can offer to an individual. So like your chat responses, we're pulling this out. I'd like for us to put some practical handles on it and see how you maybe would handle this situation. So I don't know if this happens for you as much, but in the military, it's not uncommon that we'll take on somebody not as a PG1, but rather as a PGY2. And so in this case, I have an individual, her name is Fatima. She's a PGY1/2. So in the places I worked before, we call them resiturns sometime. I'm not sure if you've ever done that yourself. She's in her late 20s and she comes to your residency after being in a transitional year surgery program. While she was in that surgery program, she was doing well academically, but she really found that she was most enjoying her time in the clinic and at the patient bedside. And she wasn't enjoying her time in the OR nearly as much. And so she, for just professional aspirations, decided to pursue a career instead in primary care, family medicine. She's at your residency now. She's eager to do well. It's clear that she's gifted and she picks up new things quickly. She adapts to your medical system really quickly. She's learning your EHR. She's learning how you schedule appointments and how you go about conducting your days. But she's not quite sure of what her role is. Is she a PGY1? Is she a PGY2? How does she fit into your system? And so with that, I'd love to hear how a mentor could benefit Fatima. So if you want to be the mentor and say the kinds of things that you would offer to her, that's great. Or if you could talk about some of the things that she might need, that would be wonderful too. Again, I will shut up, I will turn off my video, and please let's talk about it a little bit.
This is Stacy Obeid. I think one of the first things that I would want to learn more of are what the individual's goals for mentorship are in the first place. What are they seeking? What are they possibly wanting out of the mentorship relationship? So that's where I would start to get a better idea of how I could help the individual.
Thank you very much for that. I'm taking copious notes as you speak.
Hi, this is Rose Ramos. And just off my experience from mentoring Air Force residents, one of the questions that I found myself asking and found the residents wanting to share were their professional goals. Not in addition to what Dr. Obe mentioned, like often the residents don't understand their role in the mentor-mentee relationship, but I also found that we had to go a little bit further when we were mentoring active duty physician scientists or developing physician scientists, and ask what their future professional and personal goals are. Sometimes their professional goals, are very generic, to be the best physician possible. But personally, it was quite surprising to find that not every physician was interested in, was planning to stay in the military, until retirement. So it's fun, you think that wouldn't have anything to do with the mentoring, but it does. I mean, it kind of helps to develop the bond with your mentee as well.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. It's nice to hear an Air Force perspective. I'm Army. We get along.
It's the same. I had many Army mentees as well.
Dr. Shi, your comment also, that's great about asking about the challenges during the transitional year. Current interests are good. Dr. Yours also. Comfort level of patient care, good. So some very practical things as well. Are there any other comments that you want to put into the chat or speak out loud? These are really, really good. I really like that you're pulling out the idea of these goals on several of the comments, both spoken as well as in the chat, and also the mentees understanding their current skill set and then their potential role in the mentorship relationship. And we'll come back to all of those in just a little bit. What I'd like to do is take a step back just a little bit and think about what the goals of being mentored could be for Fatima or for anybody seeking out that mentoring. As you know, as clinicians, as physicians, physician assistants, nurse practitioners, all the different roles that you fill, we wear multiple hats simultaneously. Obviously, clinical is a thing that we absolutely have to do well. But when you're part of a academic health system, you're part of that tripartite mission where in addition to clinic, you also have to be engaged in education and research, scholarship as well. And so these are other axes along which you need to develop to have a successful career in medical academia or honestly any part of medicine. In the military, we have this unique area called operational medicine where we learn how to take care of troops. That's maybe a little bit less applicable to those of you who don't have a military commitment. But some of you might be working your way over to becoming a healthcare executive. And so that might be an area in which you want some mentoring, whether you look at yourself as potentially being a medical director of a clinic or possibly even the chief of a product line, chair of a department, or working in the C-suite over at the hospital. And then, of course, there is the personal mentoring and also those kind of questions that come up as well. And then what does the mentor do for this mentee? Well, in Fatima's case, facilitating understanding the structure of the health system in which she now finds herself, sponsoring her for opportunities that might be along the lines of her professional goals that she shared with you, socializing, making sure that she doesn't feel like the person that's left out, advocating for her. You know, one thing that a mentor can do as a mentee as well is they can help you to problem solve. And in addition to offering you opportunities to collaborate, they can protect you too. Think about those times when your plate has been incredibly full and you have a hard time saying no, but yet because you're the person that gets things done, people keep asking you to do things. Well, one of the great things that a mentor can do is they can go around and not behind your back per se, but maybe discreetly off to the side, they can say, hey, just to let you know, Susan has a lot that she's handling right now. This may not be the best time to give her her 15th performance improvement project. Maybe that can wait until next month. So there's a lot of things that mentors can do for you. And those are some of the benefits that you'll receive. So what I'd like to do then is take this case and look at it on maybe the flip side just a little bit. And so I'm a fictional character in your department, but let's say that you have a faculty member named Kojo. And Kojo is a member that has literal decades of experience. This is somebody who has delivered patients' babies, and then delivered those babies, and then delivered those babies' babies. So this is one of the grandfathers of family medicine in South Texas. He is well regarded as a teacher, and he actually continues to research as well, and he still gets teaching awards each year. He anticipates retiring in 5 years because at this point he would love to spend a little bit more time with his own grandchildren who live a couple states away. And so the case that I would ask for you to make right now is what would Kojo get out of mentoring others? And again, just like before, I'm going to turn off the video. Please feel free to put in your chat. Please feel free to speak out also. Let's talk about what makes mentoring worth it for somebody like Kojo. I like the response of excitement. Mentoring somebody is exciting because you never know what they're going to do. And Dr. Shi, let's assume that he is willing to serve as a mentor. He's served as a mentor at multiple times in the past. He just doesn't have anybody currently. Seeing paying it forward, emotional fulfillment.
I think it's also a bi-directional relationship as well. I think sometimes a lot of onus is put on this, the mentee is a blank slate and the mentor is going to fill that slate with information. But I still think for sure this faculty member could still also take away experiences from a younger mentee as well. So I think yes, there's this fulfillment of the faculty giving back, but also there's a lot of generational differences. Thinking about folks getting ready to retire versus your Gen Zers. And so I think it's both entities can definitely get some reward out of a process like this.
Dr. Agabita, I really, really enjoy that comment. I'm going to put my video back on here because I think you're exactly right. One of the things that I'm learning now, you are all mentoring me, is that I probably should have done a better intelligence prep of the battlefield and recognize that these grand rounds are not typically people unmuting and speaking during them. So for those of you brave souls who have actually unmuted and helped me out, I really, really appreciate that. But I think you're absolutely right with your comments. And here's a couple of things that I thought about. The idea of fostering personal growth, absolutely. A mentee who's either younger or potentially older than you can teach you things that you don't know or open new ways of thinking that you maybe hadn't pursued previously. So that fostering personal growth and enhancing knowledge and skills. There's also that Piaget level that we're supposed to reach where I think it's Piaget, I could be wrong about that, I apologize. It's one of the psychological models of how a life cycle works, in which you're either at the point where you stagnate or you're kind of building that legacy out. And so the idea of paying it forward very, very much, taking your teaching DNA, your research DNA, your academic DNA, clinical DNA, and spreading it among others that will continue to perpetuate it forward. These are all reasons to be involved in medicine or in mentoring. In addition, of course, if you get somebody to work with you on a project, and that's free labor that you would otherwise have to do, so there is a little bit of a selfish aspect there. But the great news is that you're building future colleagues, and so when you go to that next project, you have more of a network that you can pull upon, and you can continue to connect people to help them to achieve their goals as well. And I appreciate that comment as well about your mentors at UT Health San Antonio. That's great. So wanted to ask you, what are you looking for in a mentor? So all of us at every stage of our career have those people that we look up to that help provide advice, guidance, sponsorship, networking. What is it that you're looking for in a mentor? And feel free, this would probably be an easy one just to throw stuff into the text chat box if you want to. Just some one-word attributes, or if you want to put something a little bit longer, that's fine too. I like the first comment. Someone who actually wants to be a mentor. That's true. Go up to the person that doesn't want to be a mentor, probably won't get you what you're looking for. Diverse experiences, supportive, curious, resourceful, good. Those are great. Any others? I'll pull in some of the ones that I thought about while you're continuing to think about some other ones. Availability is huge. So sometimes there's that person that they're in the very top of their field, but they just have so many commitments. They're just not able to be available to you to be mentored. Ooh, I really like that word inclusive. We're going to come back to that in just a little bit. Someone who is centered on you, so they recognize that the relationship, yes, they're going to take something from it, but really they're involved in the relationship because they want to give something to you. Someone who is knowledgeable about the thing, about what you wish to learn. And then maybe think about also people who are networked that can help make connections for you to other people that can help you achieve those professional goals that you set for yourself. Good, open-minded, unbiased, absolutely. And then as a mentor, because each of you now is at a stage in your career where you can mentor other people, whether it be junior nurses with which you work, or it could be people who are maybe junior medical administrators, or it could be interns or medical students rotating with you, or pre-meds that want to know how to become like you. What are you looking for as a mentor to identify those people? Hey, I think I want to pour a little bit of my life into you. I like enthusiasm. That's a good start. Someone who's open. Good. Keep them coming. These are great. Curious, motivate. We're seeing that a lot of these attributes overlap. Wow, open and hearing hard stuff. Yeah. Not just saying that they're open, but really are open and are willing to be potentially vulnerable with you. Resourceful. Good. These are also good. Let me share a couple other ones that you might consider. Just like you said before, someone who's willing, open-minded, enthusiastic, you actually put those directly into the chat. Someone who's honest with both you and themselves. And I really like this idea of ownership as well, that they're going to take what you give them and then own it. They're not the type that point fingers. They're the ones that say, okay, this is my situation. How do we best achieve what it is that we want on the other side of it? So good. So some traits. And honestly, it should be someone that you enjoy being around, because you'll pour more of yourself into that relationship if you actually enjoy being a part of it. Couple of tips for those of you who are currently looking for a mentee. So you're thinking, okay, so not necessarily that this talk is pushing me over this way, but I was thinking for a while that I need to find some people into which I can pour a little bit of life, a little bit of this medical profession, pay it forward, build that legacy. A couple of things that you might do is look for people that have overlapping interests with you. If it turns out that you're hearing that morning report or you're attending that grand rounds that one of your residents is presenting or one of your medical students is presenting, and you're looking around and the faculty are paying attention, but there's that one faculty member that's like, oh yeah, that's great, that's great. Well, you have an interest that overlaps, so maybe that's a good way to identify a mentee. Or it could be that you have complementary strengths, like you might be the person that is all things qualitative research. You know how to build from just abstracting comments to open grounded theories. You know how to run your focus groups. And you bring in that resident that's actually spent some time in their pre-medical life doing quantitative-based research. And maybe you're interested in getting into mixed methods research studies, and maybe they're looking to do the same thing. Well, those complementary strengths maybe have identified a mentoring dyad for you. Social compatible, eager to learn. I had a couple things here that had a couple question marks, and this is where I want to talk a little bit about bias, equity, inclusivity as well. As you saw before, about 4 out of 5 men who are being mentored by men. About 70% of women who are being mentored by women. But the fact of the matter is that women are woefully underrepresented in the upper echelons of academic medicine leadership. And if men only mentor men and don't reach across and try to mentor women, we're not going to make the kind of progress we could make in trying to achieve better parity at those upper levels of medical leadership. Likewise, if you look at who's coming into the House of Medicine, we are woefully underrepresented in most parts of the country in underrepresented minorities, and specifically thinking about people who have a background that's either from Africa, the Caribbean, so African Americans, African Caribbeans, Black. You guys do a lot better as far as bringing in people that come from Latina backgrounds, but other parts of the country don't. And if white males are only mentoring other white males, we're not going to bend that curve either. So I put in a real plug here to try and think about ways to mentor across cultures, across genders, across races, ethnicities, and to be more inclusive with our efforts to try and make the House of Medicine look like a place where everybody wants to be and where they belong. The other consideration I have down here with the other question mark is the idea of rated, that's a military term. You might think about it as supervisor or supervised. And the question is, would you actually choose a mentor that actually also gives you your performance evaluation one way or another? You might choose to do that if that works for you, but that adds another wrinkle. This person is providing the advice, but at the same time, they're also providing some type of feedback that affects my pay, my performance, my graduation. That might be a little bit more difficult to navigate. So a couple models. I think a lot of us, when we think about mentoring, think about that wise person on high, mentoring that eager, young, energetic person that's up coming through the ranks. And so that's that typical mentoring dyad. There's a couple other models to consider as well. These are not all inclusive, but one of the resources I read in preparing for this talk, I had the idea of a board of directors, and this is the tack that I've taken. You think of yourself as your own company incorporated, and there's multiple different areas in which you want to shine. And it's really hard to find a mentor that covers all those different areas. And so finding people that are your mentor for research, for academics, for clinical medicine, for work-life balance, and all the other things in which you want to succeed, you create your own personal board to make that work for you. Likewise, the idea of peer and co-mentoring. So residents do this all the time. Hey, I just got back from this rotation. This is what you need to know about this attending. This is what you need to know about the way processes work over here. Here's the group of nurses who are really awesome about getting stuff done for you. Here's the couple things that you need to know as far as roadblocks and obstacles. And so trading that information among each other and also helping to mentor each other along is really great. And the idea of a mastermind group was suggested as also remembering that your mentors may not just be in medicine, they may be from other walks of life as well. So for instance, if you come from a particular faith background and you want to incorporate that faith into your practice of medicine and into your personal life, having a mentor in that dimension can be helpful as well. Or if you come from a more secular background, finding someone to help you out there and work with people in other industries as well. So if one of the things that you want to really develop is your leadership capabilities, you can find a lot of that in medicine, but it may be that somebody from another business or walk of life might be able to help you to accelerate yourself in that dimension as well. So multiple different models, you're basically finding people that have something that they're able to pass along to you that helps you to achieve your professional goals. And what you give them back as a mentee is you help them achieve their goals and also help them continue their own personal growth. So question for you is, how do you get started with your mentor mentee? And you'll be happy to know that this is a rhetorical question. You don't have to respond to it unless you really, really want to. What I'm using this as to do is a transition over to the whole idea of life cycle logistics of mentoring, because we've talked a lot of abstract thoughts so far, but what I want to do is give you some practical tips on how to actually make this relationship work. And so first off, I want to suggest the idea of phases of mentorship. This was from an article that was published in 1983, and I think it still works really well today. I've looked at a couple since then, but I think it really comes down to this. Your relationship is going to start with some type of initiation. You're going to cultivate the relationship. You're going to approach the point where it's appropriate to separate that relationship. And then you're going to redefine what your relationship looks like going on into the future. So we'll talk about those one by one. And what I want to do at this point is go back to some of the comments that you made before about goals. Because at the initiation of a relationship, it's all about being clear about the expectations for the mentoring relationship. And so that is knowing exactly what the goals are, what the mentor expects of the mentee, what the mentee expects from the mentor, how best to communicate with each other, how often to communicate with each other, and also what's the rubric for evaluating whether this relationship is working for you as the mentor or for you as the mentee. And what I would suggest to you, even though it sounds a little corny and a little formulaic, is to have a mentoring contract, an actual written document, whether it's on paper, on electrons, where actually spell these things out. They actually have examples at Mass General and some of the other academic health institutions where they actually basically just take you through these exact thoughts. What's the goal of our relationship? What's the objectives? How often can I make myself available to you? What are we going to talk about in what settings? And how are we going to know if we're approaching those goals? And so at the initiation, it's all about expectations. And if you take the time to do this, you're more likely to be successful as you go through because you can look back in your relationship and say, are we getting to where we need to go? Do we need to readjust? Or do we need to potentially go separate ways? And no fault of yours, no fault of mine, but we need different things from each other than we're able to provide right now. The next phase is cultivation. This is the really cool phase because you've laid down the expectations, you know what you hope to achieve with one another, and you're making progress towards those goals. So maybe you approach a mentor because you wanted to collaborate on a project together. This was how I started my research career when I was at the Uniformed Services University. I fell in with a group of people that were willing to mentor me and offer me projects to work on with them. This is your mentor's opportunity to advocate for you, to promote your interests, to network you. If you're working on projects together, this is their opportunity to take you to those society meetings, to introduce you to other people with whom you might work on projects in the future. Or potentially this is someone that introduces you to other people that say you want to be a healthcare executive someday, or say you want to run your own practice, people who have successfully done that and give you tips and pointers for doing that as well. And this is an interesting time because you're learning from that mentor. So you're adopting some of their ways of thinking, their ways of being, and you're forming a really nice bond. And it's important during this time to continue to refer back to those goals that you wrote down in that contract to see if you're making progress towards those goals, evaluate the relationship to see if it's still giving you what you need, and also understand if that relationship is approaching the point where you potentially need to either separate or redefine your relationship to one another. And that's the next phase. So just like all things, there comes a point where a mentoring relationship is approaching its end. Your goals have been accomplished and you notice because you have that contract, you're evaluating your goals on at least a yearly basis. Your roles are starting to break down. You're less mentor mentee and more collaborators. Perhaps you as a mentee are starting to see other avenues that you want to pursue, and they're different from those that your mentor was pursuing. And so you have this built-in clause in your contract essentially that says, hey, when we get to this point, we need to start thinking about bringing this relationship to an end, this mentor-mentee relationship. But that's not the end of your time with this person because now you're open to redefining the last stage of what it looks like. So initiation, cultivation, separation, redefinition. This is where a mentor has brought somebody along to the point where they have a new colleague, a new person in their network that they can rely upon and introduce to other people. This is where a mentee now has their own projects that they want to follow, but they still can reach back to this person for advice or whatever else they need. This is where you have a mentor create your legacy, and as a mentee, former mentee, you now have the opportunity to go further, farther, faster on your own, or possibly with other mentors, hopefully. And then throughout this whole relationship, yes, there's going to be a lot of work in the professional setting, but also mentorship can happen in the social setting. It gives you an opportunity to see that work-life balance that's so important to all of us. It helps with that bonding. It's an opportunity just to be with one another, not necessarily to be involved in advising or teaching or coaching at that point, but just to enjoy each other's company a little bit. And then evaluation, I mentioned this at multiple points along the way. It's important to evaluate each other. Think, what can I do better for you as your mentor? What can I do better for you as a mentee? Are we accomplishing those goals? Are we reaching that point where we need to separate? So at this point, I want to be conscious of the time. I only have a few more slides I'm sure that I want to share, but I'd really be interested in hearing about your experiences with mentoring others or being mentored yourself. And to set the tone, I'd love to share an example of how I didn't do a very good job with a mentoring-mentee relationship. I was being mentored. I had just assumed the role as our Dean of Admissions at the Uniformed Services University. And there was someone with whom I was working who was really helping me to learn the ropes of administration really well, how to run a department, of how to think about strategically planning for building a medical school class. And that continued on. And after about a year and a half of the job, I felt that I had a really, really good handle on it. And I began relying a little bit less on this senior individual's advice, which was fine. There's no problems there. Later on, this individual was added to my admissions committee. And as the dean, I was responsible for the working of the committee, but the committee made their own decisions on who was going to be admitted to the university. I had a role to play, but so did they as well. And we actually found that we saw things differently. Um, and that friction, where before I had basically been taking everything this individual had offered and simply putting it into practice because I thought it was really good advice that was going to help me further the school's goals. Now that they were seeing things a different way, and now that we were more on the level of peers, our relationship had broken down from mentor-mentee. This was our opportunity to separate and redefine. I did not do that well. And so there was a lot of friction, a lot of conflict. And as a result, it's been really difficult for me to approach that particular individual. So that's an example of a relationship from which I learned a tremendous amount. But unfortunately, I didn't stick the landing. I didn't we did it all the way up to the point where we could redefine our relationship and work collegially together. So I'll offer that to you. I would love to hear about your experiences, maybe some good ones, or maybe you have a negative experience from which we could all learn as well. But I will stop talking again and allow you to share. Okay, that was about a minute. So I imagine that you're hopefully reflecting on your own and have some great stories that you've shared with yourself. I have just a few more slides and then we can get to the question and answer period proper. I want to offer you this as maybe a mental model to think about how to go about working with a mentee, or if you're someone looking to be mentored, what you should be asking for in that relationship. On the x-axis, you see the word challenge, and so the challenge increases as you go to the right. On the y-axis, you see support, which increases as you go up. And so if you're in a relationship where there's really no challenge and honestly not a lot of support, you're in this quadrant that we call stasis. And this isn't original with me, it's in my references at the end, but without challenge, without support, nothing's really happening. And so definitely want to reevaluate that relationship and potentially separate and find a new mentoring relationship in which to engage. If you're finding that you have a tremendous amount of challenge, but very little support, you're kind of in that quadrant that we call retreat. This is excessive pimping. This is harsh feedback without any steps for improvement. This is challenge, 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 challenge all the time, but without the undergirding support that you need to move forward. Retreat. If you find yourself in a relationship where you have a tremendous amount of support, but not a whole lot of challenge, not a lot of pushing you to try new things or to expand or to move into different areas, then you're basically in that quadrant that we call confirmation or cheerleading. And we all need that, but that's not necessarily going to push you to where you want to go. When you are encountering support and challenge at the same time, you're in that growth quadrant, and that's when you can start moving towards your vision and becoming that physician, that healthcare administrator, that nurse that you're hoping to be. And so with that, this is the ground that we've covered. Like before, I told you what we were going to talk about. We talked about it, and then this is a slide that summarizes that. We gave you a little bit of the epidemiology of mentoring, showed you a little bit of literature. We thought through some of the definitions, the roles, and then the logistics or the life cycle associated with it. And so these are my summary points. Number one, you need to be in a mentoring relationship. Mentors and mentees tend to have overlapping and complementary interests. So if you're looking for ways to identify people with which you might want to work, you have one right there. And then also to remember that the mentoring relationship has that predictable lifestyle and a natural end. And hopefully you can stick that landing better than I do and redefine that relationship. And at the end of it all, have a new person with which to collaborate and to call your friend at the same time. So these are my references. See, some of them come from the academic medicine literature. Some of them come from the lay press as well. And I think we have the slides, so I won't land here too long. And then I'll ask for your questions or comments. In addition to that, I'd really appreciate any feedback. I'm used to presenting to military audiences. I think we have a little bit of learned institutional helplessness because we're primed to, whenever someone prompts us, to jump in with answers and stuff like that. So this is a little bit of a different experience for me. So if there's ways that I can better reach audiences like yourself in the future, I'd really appreciate that feedback. And I appreciate you being here today. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak with you. Nicole, I'll just stay on in case there's any questions.
Yes, that is good. I appreciate you presenting. It seems like everybody, like polling team is a tough crowd today, but I do appreciate you presenting for us. And we'll see here, we'll give it just a minute here and see if anybody has any comments or any questions for you.
I do want to let you know that I tailored this presentation to you. I wasn't sure exactly to which crowd I'd be pitching this. When I've done this presentation in the past, I made it the Jedi method of mentoring. And so there was a tremendous amount of Star Wars pictures from all the way from the original trilogy through the prequels to the sequels to the Mandalorian. I was getting ready to add in Clone Wars and Bad Batch and all the rest, but I thought, you know what? This is a professional crowd. I don't know if this will go over that well. So we went a little bit more traditional for you all. And thank you for those comments. I appreciate it. General Hepburn, it's nice to see you, see your name again. They miss you at USU.
If you are okay with it, Dr. Saguil, am I okay to distribute these references to the group that has joined today?
Absolutely. Please feel free to do so. I do see that there's one question.
Yes.
My first faculty job was a low mentoring environment. Advice in that situation. So please help me to understand just a little bit better. I'm guessing that your first faculty job was in a area where there wasn't really a culture of mentoring. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I think that two different ways of approaching that. Number one, if it's something that is important to you that you want to do, you'll find a way to make that happen. The problem is that you don't have a lot of support because you have a bunch of other responsibilities. And if you don't have that culture of mentoring, maybe it's not valued as much, and maybe it takes away from other responsibilities. And so it makes it all that much harder for you to be engaged in that. And so this may be something where it would be appropriate to approach the leadership, whether that was a faculty job in a residency and you approach the residency director or one of the administrators of that residency program, or if you were in a department, to approach the department leadership as well, and to ask them. It may very well be that the culture is there not because people want to be there, but people just don't know how to get it off the ground. And maybe knowing that there's enough people that are interested in making it happen is enough for the leadership to want to take that on. So without knowing all the specifics of that situation, that would be maybe some advice that I would give for that. When the relationship comes to an end, do you have suggestions for transitioning to a colleague-to-colleague relationship? Thank you, a really great question. I think that potentially one of the things that could help the most is if you took the time to set up those goals at the very beginning. So this is assuming that you haven't already started the relationship. If you set up the goals for that mentoring-mentee relationship, and whether you actually write it down or you simply agree upon them at the beginning, then as you go through that relationship and you recognize that you're accomplishing those goals, I think it's easier to have that conversation about how the goals for the relationship have been achieved. And now it's time to either consider whether or not you want to continue this mentoring relationship with other goals in mind, or to agree to allow the mentee to continue on along their path, seeking out other mentors while you go along your path. So I think being very clear about those goals at the beginning allow you to make that transition a whole lot easier. If you're currently involved in a mentoring relationship, it's never too late to step back and say, hey, we've been doing this for a while. Why don't we talk about the goals? Why don't we talk about what the rest of this relationship looks like? Whether it's going to be one that continues beyond your time in our residency program, in our department associated with our program, or if we had some time limited definitive goals we were hoping to achieve and then using that as a springboard to talk about how to transition to the colleague-to-colleague relationship. Nicole, I think we're all done.
Okay, that sounds good. I do know that since we've recorded this, it will be available and it will probably be a very helpful resource for many as we continue with our professional development and things that we've got going on here at the university. So definitely appreciate your time today and for your presentation, very helpful. And if everybody could please take a moment to fill out the feedback evaluation for Dr. Saguil. And if you need anything, just let us know. But thank you again very much for your presentation and for everybody who joined.
Thank you. And if you really, really didn't like my presentation, please put that in the feedback. Otherwise, they might invite me back again. So I don't want that to happen to you if you really don't want it to happen. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.